Hey, I'm Patch, and I've been pursuing my dream of developing a game for 16 years now. Most of that time has been spent learning, and in that time of learning, I've learnt pixel art, music composition, and enough programming to make my own custom game engine from scratch. Everything you see in this video is 100% made by me, and I refuse to use AI for any of it. I didn't use it to make the music, I didn't use it to draw, didn't use it to storyboard, and didn't use it to code. I just refuse and continue to refuse to use AI for anything. And in this video, I want to take you along for the ride. I want to show you this journey of mine of pursuing this game and finally actually developing it and going through all of the stages of what that's like as a game developer. So, the first line of business is to talk about what the game is. Well, currently it looks like this, which as you can tell is not a whole lot at the moment. But it's very early in development. It wouldn't be much of a story if I started at the end of the game development journey. And as you can probably tell, it's a little similar to Minecraft, though personally I would say it's part of this Infiniminer lineage, because Minecraft was actually inspired by Infiniminer. Let's go over some of the key ideas that makes this game a bit different from any of the other hundreds of thousands of games out there. The first idea I have for this game is that I want the world to feel alive. I think it's a shame that a lot of sandboxes these days give the player a massive world to inherit, but that world just never changes. Sure, it might be infinite and you can explore in any direction you want, but if you go back, nothing's different, nothing's changed. I want a sandbox game where the world is alive, where the world changes with the player and in response to what the player does. For example, say the player wants a stone bridge in a stream, and they go about building that. And they make this nice, wonderful stone bridge, and they build this lovely stream that goes under it. I want moss to start to grow as a result of that. The moss sort of knows there's water there, and stone is a great place for it to grow on, and so it starts to grow on this stone bridge. But maybe the additional moss causes snails to want to inhabit that area, and so snails come along to eat the fresh moss. There's lots of costs associated with designing a game like that. Namely performance and time to implement all of the different features and balance them together. But I think if I can even just do a few of these, I think that will make the game feel so much more alive, especially in the sandbox environment, that I think it will really help player immersion. Another important thing to remember is that some of these mechanics are annoying. To remedy that, I want to make it really easy for the player to disengage with the mechanic if they choose to. Not with a rule that they set when they create the world or a command that they run on a multiplayer server, but instead I want there to be in-game mechanics that can be used to prevent things like moss from growing if the player just doesn't want that to their bridge. Additionally, I want to make the process of removing things like moss very satisfying and make it sort of feel like a power washing simulator-esque scenario where they don't actually mind removing the moss. They actually enjoy removing the moss. Not every mechanic will be like that, like not every mechanic will be stuff growing. I have mechanic ideas for fertilization, for instance, where bees and bats, they fertilize crops and stuff like that. But for all the negative mechanics, I want to make it easy for people to just disengage and ignore them if they want to. Additionally, some of these mechanics I'd like to be seasonal. I would really like autumn leaves to be a thing, and for winter to occasionally come with snow depending on what climate you're in. Stuff like that I think just makes the whole world feel way more alive and way less static in a way that I think is really interesting. My goal with all this is not to make the world realistic. You know, if you want a realistic world, you can just go outside. I want to make a fantasy world, but I want to make a fantasy world that importantly feels lived in and changes over time. The next idea I have is that I just want the game to be cozy. I don't want this game to be really involved, where you have to put all of your mental energy into it to succeed. I think most of the time, I want you to just be at your house, working on it, or if you're on a multiplayer server, just in your town with all your friends. I want to discourage players from building industrial farms, and instead encourage players to build local, homegrown farms, which yield better crops than the industrial variants. However, if the comforts of life create boredom, and you seek adventure, there will be challenges to be had out there if you explore and seek them out. Most of the time, if you have a house, you're cozy, you're safe. But if you take on too many dragons or you try to take specific challenges, you may find that eventually an attack gets mounted against your house, and a town might not be sufficient anymore. You might need a castle instead. I want the game to be well built. It's not really an idea, but this is really, really important to me as a software engineer. And in order to offer the best performance possible, I'm building all of this in a custom game engine written in Rust. If you aren't techie, it just means that I deliberately gave myself every single possible optimization opportunity. That doesn't mean it will be fast by default. It doesn't mean it will be feature rich by default. But it does mean that I have the potential for it. I have every possible opportunity to make those optimizations. And I've spent many, many, many years learning about how to do those kinds of things. It's really important to me as well because I want the game to be able to run anywhere. I want it to be able to run on low-end hardware, I want it to be able to run on high-end hardware, and I want to support as many platforms as possible. And a custom game engine, the way I've designed it, helps me achieve that. Currently, my game runs on Windows, Linux, which includes the Steam Deck, macOS, and iOS. I do have plans to support Android and iPadOS at some point, and they almost certainly will be supported in the future. As for consoles like the Switch 2, Xbox, or PlayStation 6, I'll support them if I can, but I likely won't be able to support them right away. I probably need the game to be somewhat successful to be able to afford a port like that. Lastly, the final idea is that I want the game to be for everyone. And you can kind of see that in the way that I was talking about before of porting my game to as many platforms and trying to support old hardware. I want to keep in mind that some people are colorblind, that some people are partially or fully deaf, and I want to design my game with accessibility in mind. And I just want to get this out now that I'm not an expert here. I need your guys' feedback. So if you have a disability, whether visible or invisible, and you have some idea that would make my game more accessible to you, please let me know. Your feedback is really important to me. Since you're still here, I think I can trust you. During development, I've made a few mistakes along the way, and I didn't want to show these up front because I think some people might get the wrong idea that this is what the game will look like, when in reality, all games look like this at some point. Glitches happen, mistakes get made. The important thing is that they get fixed. And in early development, it's way more likely for these things to happen, but they all get fixed eventually. Just bear in mind that all of these have been fixed, and I just thought that they looked cool, so I wanted to show you. So, it's time for Glitch Theater. Lastly, a progress report. It's taken a lot of time to get here, and this is the first devlog, so a progress report isn't really very meaningful, but I've managed to make a custom game engine with support for all the platforms I mentioned before, and some very basic scaffolding support for things like iPadOS and Android. And I'm just super excited in general that I'm up to this point. And that also, finally, I'm writing devlogs and I'm able to share some of this with you. Behind you is some pre-alpha and in-development footage. I hope it kind of shows how much effort was put into this, and I'm just really thankful that you watched the video. So this is Patch Unwrap, signing off. Stay awesome.